Hello and well met. This is Founder Leroon again with Fantasy Grounds Academy. We're going to use the Fantasy Grounds Unity platform to create a character using the Fantasy Grounds Unity platform and the DnD5e Rule-set. So the rule set here is one of the more popular ones. That's why we use it all the time, and it's also the one I'm familiar with. But just keep in mind that Fantasy Grounds does support other virtual tabletops, and that other rule sets are different in some of the ways that characters are built. So that is where most of the difference lies. Everything else is pretty much the same or labeled similarly. So if you're using Pathfinder or one of the other rule sets, the interface will be similar. The only differences I can really see mostly is in character creation and managing some of the features within the rule set. But all the locations and most of the different places where the categories are stored are going to be very similar. Like on the right-hand side, all these different little doodads here, these are all different groups. So to create a character, in most cases, you need content, or you need to be connected to a game master, depending on your situation. So if you don't own any content, you can use the demo. You can connect to a host or your game master, and they will share their books with you. So in the library, when you first start Fantasy Grounds, you can load the SRD and the D&D basic rules, which will give you a little bit of data so that you can play around with it in the demo version. However, you're a bit fairly limited. If you are connected to a host, you will have access to their library. So whatever they share with you, you'll have access to it. So this will assume that you either have your own content or you are a player and that you are connected to someone else's table. So if you don't have these requirements, this may or may not help you much, but I'm going to go ahead and use the built-in character builder, or the character wizard is what it's called. And I'm going to do that by first, I'm going to sort this list out on the right-hand side. The reason I'm going to do that is so it's not overwhelming or too confusing. So I'm going to come up here to the options. When you're the game master or the host, you're going to have all these buttons depending on what mode you start in. So if I go to sidebar, that's going to allow me to manage these options. And the only thing I'm going to do is click on Create PC. And that's going to eliminate the buttons that I don't need right now. So that'll help with the interface, so it's just not overwhelming and too many different things going on. The next thing is I'm going to select characters, or it might be PC, or it might be personalities, or whatever game system you're in, but it'll be very similar. So this is the character selection area. You can create a character manually, like we used to before the character wizard was created. So you would do that by clicking on the bottom right corner. There's a green plus button. If you click that, that'll add a blank character sheet. You'll fill this out in steps and drag and drop your options. The problem with this method is that, yes, you'll get a better, thorough understanding of Fantasy Grounds, especially the drag and drop features, but you're committed to whatever you drag over. So if you drag the background over, you're pretty much stuck with it. You can't go back and fix it later. So this kind of makes it a little bit frustrating and discouraging for people that are new, and if they would decide to change their mind before they start playing. So the character wizard kind of gives you a little bit better opportunity to avoid that. So what we're going to do is start with the character wizard instead of the old drag and drop method. So if I click on the character wizard, which is on the top left corner of the character selection window, this is the new character wizard, and this is basically a character builder. This was not inherently part of the rule set initially, like Pathfinder 2 actually was built with that in mind. This has been adapted retroactively to try to pick up on all the different content that's out. So there will be a few bugs occasionally. Those are being updated and worked on, and if you find any and you have the time, report those to the Fantasy Grounds forums and the House of Healing, and they'll take care of it. You just give them your log, a copy of your character, and they'll look into it, and they're usually pretty quick at fixing that. So they really want this to work. So with our help, it will definitely get better, and there will be less problems as time goes on. But this has come a long ways. When I first started using it, there was a lot of different errors and such. It is a work in progress. It will always be a work in progress, especially if they add new content. So as new content is added, little things might get missed or changed, so those will be ironed out in time. So the first thing they present you with is race. So if you go to the player's handbook, so I'm going to go to the library, and I'm assuming you have this loaded, and go to the player's handbook, you have a reference manual if you own the content. So if you open up the reference manual, there is a section here about creating characters. Before, you had to basically follow a certain order in order to build a character. So you had to do your ability scores, your background, your race, and your class. So we used to call it a battle-ready character. That's how we remembered how the order to build. And the reason there's an order to it is because the way that Fantasy Grounds calculates things, it can throw it off if it's done in the wrong order. So what this does is it allows you to have a little bit more flexibility in those 4 options. So you have race, stats, class, and background listed up here on top. In the actual book, it says to choose a race, choose a class, do your ability scores, describe your character, do your equipment. So you can follow this order, and you can use these buttons in any way you want up here on the top right of the character builder. So you can build this in any order. I'm just going to go by the order of the buttons, but if you follow the book, it says to choose your race first, and that's what we're doing. So we'll go ahead and grab a race. So I want to build something not as common, maybe a half-orc. I don't have all of the books loaded, so I just have the Player's Handbook and the Sword Coast Adventures Guide. So I'm going to pick probably a human variant or a tiefling. Let's go with a tiefling. Tieflings are interesting. So I'm going to click on a tiefling. And when you select it, it's going to give you this line here. And on the right-hand side where the dragon is, if you click on that, you can read about the tiefling before you even make the commitment. So you can go through and see what they get. So at the bottom, when you scroll down to the bottom, these are the traits. Then you have some suggested names and some lore and that sort of thing. So this is just a guide, and this comes out of the Player's Handbook or whatever book you're in, and then there's all the traits that are listed here for the actual Fantasy Grounds data. So that's basically how you would access the information. So let's say you didn't want the tiefling. So if you click back on this race button up here, you can select a different race, and you can read about it, and then you can select the sub-race, which in this case, for a Dragonborn, you can select which draconic ancestry is available. So you don't have to make the commitment. Whereas before, if you had a character sheet, you would have taken this character sheet, you would drag over or read your content and then drag and drop it. But once you do that, you can't switch it. So what this does is it allows you to switch between the races and such without committing. And that's the biggest difference between this and the traditional way of building characters with Fantasy Grounds Classic. Now that we've moved into Unity, there's going to be more options, and this is definitely one of those. So this will make things a little bit easier for new people or for players that are still kind of getting their hands around or getting their mind wrapped around the rule set. So this will help a little bit with that. It's very frustrating if you drag something over and you decide, oh crap, I didn't want that, and you have to go back and redo the character. That's not very fun. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the race that I was going to pick before. So again, I'm going to click on Select Race. I'll go to Tiefling, and that'll be my choice. And once it's satisfied, it will have a check mark next to the race. Now the next button is the stats. So the statistics or the stats for the characters are going to be determined for you with the standard array initially. So when you first select this, and this is why it's checked off, because all these fields are already populated. So it's 15, 14, 13, it would be 12, 10, and 8, but it has the racial modifiers added to it already. So those are down here at the bottom. So this is a standard array. It's based off the point buy system. You are free to arrange these any way you want. So if you want to move any of these, you use the arrows on the bottom here to move the stat to the corresponding cell where you want it to populate. Down here are just the racial adjustments, so you can keep those in mind as you're making your adjustments. So this character had a charisma of 8, but with being a tiefling, they got a charisma boost of +2, so that the final is 10. So it already calculates that. Now, if you don't like the standard array or you want to roll, use the drop-down menu. Click on dice roll, or you can do a manual entry where you just enter it by hand, or you can do a point buy system that you do yourself. So you just go ahead and you would add up. It'll add up to how many points that you're using. Normally, 27 is the ability score. And down at the bottom, it says ability points unspent. So it's letting you know that you still have points to use based off of the rules as written with the 27 point buy system. So let's do that. So I'm going to take the strength and I'm going to bump that up a little bit. So I'm only going to bump it up by 1. I don't see this character being a big strength-based individual. Dexterity. So I'm going to bump this up a little bit higher than normal. So I'm going to go with 12 for now. And you can see how many points you've spent just to get it to there. And the point buy total is added as you increase. So for anything above like 10 or 11, it starts costing you more. So Constitution, I'm just going to flat that out to 10. That's all I want there. Intelligence, I'm going to leave that at 10 because they get a +1 anyway. So we'll see where it stacks up. And Wisdom, I'll make that 10. And then I will add 1 to the Charisma so that they have a choice of what direction they want to go. So this character, I might make it an Arcane Trickster. So that's kind of what the direction I want to go. So that's something that you may or may not want to do depending on what your needs are. But I'm going to make an Arcane Trickster, a rogue type. I think that'll work for this build. We'll see. So most rogues need to have dexterity, so I'm going to bump that up a couple more. So now it's at 14, and I have roughly, 12 points left to use. So I got to start thinking about where I want to put them. So an Arcane Trickster is going to rely on dex mostly and maybe intelligence because their spells are generally generated from a wizard spell list type thing. So I'm going to go ahead and bump up intelligence a couple, so that gives them 13 intelligence. They have a 14 dex, so I'm going to bump that up 1. And that still gives me quite a few points to work with. So I might go ahead and bump up the charisma by 1 just to make it 12, which isn't bad. I'm going to bring the con up to a reasonable number of maybe 12. So that will help with hit points, I believe. And then I think for the intelligence part of things, I'm going to bump it up 1 more. So I'm at 23. I have 4 points to spend. So I think to make this more, well spent, I think if I add the strength of 10, which is just a balanced number, and then I can bump up the charisma by 1. So that helps a little there with with tricking people, basically, charming them. And I think it would behoove me to try to bring up the con by 1, and I think that's about as... I got 1 more point to spend, so I can probably put it in wisdom. Let me check out intelligence. Nope. So I overspent there. It tells you down here you're overspent. So no more on intelligence. Let's try charisma again. Yep. So charisma's 14, 10 wisdom, 14 intelligence, 13 con, 15 dex, 10 strength. That's not too bad for a starting character, and that includes the racial bonuses already. So it calculates those based off the race you chose. So that's why it's nice to have your race there, so you can offset those depending on what you need. So those are basically the ability scores, and then you have a choice. If you want to roll, it will roll the stats for you, and then you can choose and you can mix and match or however you want to do it. So it will manually roll the dice. I like the stats I have now, so I'm just going to leave it. But if you want to do a dice roll, you click on it, it immediately rolls dice, and it will just assign the numbers as they fall. And then you can decide, or your game master can help you switch these around. But generally, what happens here is you can move the numbers up and down, or side to side, depending on which methodology you're using. So it really depends on your needs and what your DM is allowing you to do. So that's part of it. So the next thing is the class. So if I click on class, this is where I'm going to choose the class I want to be. And what's nice is still we're not committed to anything in particular. So if I change my mind at first level, I can make some choices and changes before I hit save. The whole idea is to get all this worked out and then hit save. So I'm going to go ahead and pick a rogue, because that's what the type of character I want to play. So here's the class. That's the type of class I'm selecting. And when you do so, you can click on the rogue button up here. It will bring up the player's handbook entry and give you all the different things that come with the rogue on the base level. And then it will list some of the different the archetypes on the bottom. So there's the Arcane Trickster that I will choose, but you don't get it until 3rd level. So I'll show you how to do that shortly. So for now, I'm just going to worry about the class, and you get 4 proficiencies with this particular build. So I am definitely going to have some persuasion, maybe stealth, definitely that. Acrobatics, okay, there's 2 right there. Perception, maybe. Yeah, I'll do perception and persuasion. So that'll help with this character build. So this is the Trickster build. I don't have any more proficiency choices, and if you're going to do multi-class, this is when you'd start that. But I'm not going to. So that's basically all of the satisfaction that I need for that. Now the last thing is a background choice. So background should probably fit in with your lore, or your backstory, or however you want it to turn out. I'm going to pick something that's going to be in line with this particular character. So an Arcane Trickster is going to be somebody that's more public and it's involved with different things. So I might do an Entertainer, which might lend itself to some of the different skills that he already has. And if that's the case, it won't let you double up. So on the traditional build, if you drag over a class that already shares the same abilities and such for your background features, then they would double up and you had no way of knowing that. So if you pick something that already has these skills, it will leave the option open for you to choose another one. So that's one nice thing about this character wizard. So if I want to pick a spy or an urchin, I can do something like that. So the Trickster is, an Entertainer could be something that we look at. And if you want to read it, you can click on it. You go down, scroll down to the bottom. There's the tables to build their backstory. You get a tool with it, and you get acrobatics and performance. So right off the bat, you would know that acrobatics is probably something that you'll be able to re-choose, in other words. So let's do that. So I have a choice now because it's doubled